your local radio station.
Llanelli Talk Radio.
You're listening to the Llanelli Talk Radio podcast. As we approach May the 6th and the Senedd Elections, we're conducting a series of podcasts really looking at the political landscape. You may be a keen purveyor of the news, and you may have read recently across many of the news sites some of the headlines concerning the party leaders and the parties themselves. We're going to take a quick sort of hoover up of those items in the news and look at some of the political leaders and the parties and what they've had to say recently. Joining me in the studio, as always, is our political analyst, Gwynoro Jones. You're listening to the Llanelli Talk Radio podcast. Welcome along. In the studio with me today is Gwynoro Jones. Gwynoro, croeso.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr.
Gwynoro, looking at the news headlines, we can see quite a lot, as you'd expect in the lead up to the Senedd Elections. News sites full of stories, scandal, all sorts of things relating to the parties and the candidates themselves. Let's just, in no particular order, let's start with Adam Price then, right? Adam Price has been asked in the news now on over the issue of independence. What currency? What are the borders going to be? A lot of wide-ranging questions that people really would expect answers to, given that it's a major player in their political manifesto and their movement as such. He said they can't give some of those answers until they're actually in power. What do you make of that?
Well, there's some truth in what he's just said, but the reality is issues like the currency, issues like head of state, the monarchy, matters in relation to defence and all, they should have a general stand of what they stand for, what the implications are for Wales of independence. But of course, you see, the Independent Commission that was set up by Plaid Cymru recently, and a book has been published on it, their findings, they are giving two options really. Wales independent within Europe and Wales as a confederation within the United Kingdom. So therefore, I'm not quite sure where Adam himself stands. But of course, it's about time that they came clear and discussed openly the implications on the currency, the implications on the funding of Wales and how things will materialise. It's part of the whole debate. It's part of the public conversation. So I'm rather surprised that he's not a bit more forthcoming. He can't possibly say that he doesn't know. There are obviously ideas going around, but let's talk about them openly. It's election time. Talk about them.
I'm looking at some of the recent polls today as well, and one of them was, I know it's a bit trivial maybe, but who would make the best First Minister? And Adam Price comes in behind Andrew R.T. Davies. Are you surprised by that?
It goes, first of all, by the political parties, doesn't it? I suspect Drakeford is number one, Andrew Davies is number two, Adam is number three. The biggest worry, if I was the leader of Plaid Cymru, is this. The opinion polls have varied in the last 2 or 3 months on the issue of independence, which is the key Plaid Cymru standard-bearer policy. Now, 25 to 30% of the Welsh people are inclined to support independence. But Plaid Cymru get less than 20% themselves. So if I was a Plaid Cymru member and a leader and a strategist, why is it that there's more support for the independence movement in Wales than there is for Plaid Cymru itself? In other words, are they failing to get their message across? Is there something that is missing in the whole strategy? Or Is it the fact that there are people that support independence that come from other parties as well, and they're not gearing in towards Plaid Cymru?
We've talked about this being the first election where 16-year-olds are able to vote, and Plaid Cymru have announced, Adam Price has said there will be no youth unemployment. It'll be down to zero. He's made that promise. A realistic promise?
Well, it's a hostage to fortune, isn't it? And that is the problem, you see, manifestos. I never liked manifestos back when I was in politics, because at the end of the day, a lot of it is never carried out. A lot of it is window dressing, but also there are a lot of serious commitments. Now, that is a serious commitment. Okay, he possibly could get away with it by saying more apprentices, putting more youth, putting more people on courses in colleges and areas of that kind. But to actually say that youth unemployment will be zero is a major, major hostage to fortune.
Looking at the finances, the economy, obviously that's the key element for any First Minister, any government. Adam Price has said he would take full personal responsibility for that economy. There are some going to be sort of raising the alarm bells, aren't there? I mean, we interviewed Llanelli Jones and we asked her the question about his business dealings with Idoba, where, if you go online, it's public record, Company's House, you can see that there are creditors, there are people owed a lot of money, a lot of public money was put in there and the firm went bust. Do you have concerns there, given, those revelations then, and his claim that he will be taking personal responsibility for billions of pounds of the Welsh budget?
Well, at the time, I didn't have concerns. My biggest concern has always been about Adam, that he promises. He's always a big promiser guy, a big vision guy. He reminds me so much of Gwynoro Evans. Gwynoro Evans used to say all the time, Wales would be free within 3 years after he won in 66. Then he won in 74. Wales would be free in 3 years. Adam is a bit like that. It's going to happen in the next 10 years or whatever. You know what I mean? That was my biggest concern about Adam. But having looked into that story, there is a concern there too, that he had a very unfortunate business experience where it wasn't 12 months, to be fair. I think it was more like 18 months, that the business ran up a debt of 1.2 million, mind, within 18 months. And owing when it was wound up in 2015, 2016, I think, it owed something like 700,000, and those people were never paid. In fact, if I read what the document said, 176,000 was owed to the Welsh Government. I'm sure I'm pretty right there. So yes, there's a concern. But look, you can get it wrong by going into business. Adam dipped his toe in the business world and he got burnt and he got it wrong. So if I was him, I would not say I will take personal charge of the economy. That's a bit of another hostage to fortune.
Let's look at First Minister Mark Drakeford then. And we've questioned him over a year, really, online at the press conferences. And I remember speaking to him about whether or not, as we approached the election, this was some weeks back, that cynics would say that lifting these restrictions and giving and all the money coming out for the people of Wales and organisations was this cynical electioneering. And the BBC have picked that up today. That is another accusation they lay at his feet. Is it a fair accusation?
Well, politics is politics. Politicians are politicians. It's natural for a political leader to put the best foot forward as they go through the campaign. But I think, to be fair, he's handled the COVID situation fairly well. And the opinion polls, the Welsh people give him more credit than is given credit to Johnson, for instance. But the relaxation is happening everywhere. Happening in England, happening in Wales, happening in Scotland. Whether he is tactically putting it all together at the right moment, well, I'm not in a position to say that, but I can understand why it's happening. But in any case, the pressure is on, isn't it? People are looking forward to greater freedom and relaxations. The pressure is there. And the Conservatives and Andrew Davies is putting bigger pressure on. He wants it hastened up even further than what Drakeford is saying. So I think it's understandable what he's doing, and I think it's broadly an unfair criticism, but I know why the criticism is made.
We have seen a lot of Mark Drakeford over the last 12 months. He's been this sort of figurehead on television, on radio. He's been everywhere, really. The BBC followed him, ITV have followed him. His language has changed slightly. He's using the sort of royal we when he speaks about issues, we in Wales and so on. Do you think, there is a difficulty here, there is a problem here, certainly for the other candidate, in that he's really had free rein. There's been very little challenge, very little, public debate, meetings, discussions, attacks and so on. He's on a sort of a home run, isn't he?
Well, certainly the ball is in his court and he's played it relatively well. Yes, look, politics at the moment is in a very funny state, isn't it? There's, as you've just said, there's been hardly any party politics since March of 2020, for the last year plus. And hence, political government leaders, Sturgeon, Johnson, Drakeford, they've had a free run because this challenge has been difficult. Parliament is hardly ever sitting. When it sits, very few people there. All these Zoom meetings, people laud Zoom meetings as being a great advance. It actually isn't a great advance. It inhibits debate. It inhibits structure, analysis and monitoring and questioning. Yes, so therefore they've had a free run. But unfortunately, that's been the game for the last 15 months.
Looking at...
we can't blame Drakeford for that, by the way, can we?
Looking at the key issue there again, it keeps cropping up, this independence. And Drakeford has been quite clear to a certain extent, although you would say that he's fudged the issue really on independence. And he wants to remain within the union, but have far greater powers given down as almost as a sort of a sweetener. He wants the criminal justice system, health, education, far more powers devolved to Wales from Westminster in order to do that deal and stay within the union. Is he right? Is this something that might just affect the vote and work in Plaid's favour?
Well, Wales is divided on this future governance and future sovereignty. All polls show that, and it's always been like that. Wales is a very divided country on how it governs itself. Remember, even 20 years ago, there was only 0.3% difference, with even the second referendum being turned down in favour of Assembly then, as Senedd as it is now. The Welsh Labour Party, my criticism of the Welsh Labour Party is this. I do not understand why by now they have not set up a commission to look into the future governance of Wales. I mean, the Senedd itself. They've got to address this, because make no bones about it, all the indications from Westminster, the indications are that Westminster is trying to take a bit back more control. The internal market bill, how the British economy is governed, how money is dispersed to Wales after we've left the European Union. The Senedd is being bypassed. The money local authorities are applying directly to London. Now, that is a complete undermining of the situation. I don't understand why Labour is not more assertive and saying, we are going to set up a commission to establish and work out the future governance of Wales. And that would involve the people in a national conversation. At the moment, you've got half a dozen of them. Gwynoro Jones, Miles, Antoniw, Mark himself. They are hinting at more powers. They are hinting at a federal UK. They're talking in that direction. But let's be clear. At least with Plaid Cymru, you've got the independent stance. Broadly, that's where they stand. Now, Labour needs to clarify better its situation.
Looking now at the Conservatives then, under R.T. Davies, you have lived, I have lived through Thatcherism, Conservatism, and all that sort of entailed. We're used to the savage cuts. Yet here we have Andrew R.T. Davies promising new hospitals, new schools, far more jobs. Is this a kind of complete turnaround? Is this something that we can rely on and trust, given the track record of the Tories certainly in Westminster?
Well, he's mimicking, isn't he, a bit of what Johnson and Sunak have been saying, that things are going to get better. There will be a levelling up across the UK. There will be more public investment in infrastructure, in roads, in railways and other things. There will be more hospitals built. What did Johnson say? 40 more hospitals over the next 10 years or whatsoever. So he's following that trend. So he's talking of the relief road, the M4, the A50 and the A40, improving all these roads. My problem with it all is this country is in dire debt, over 2 trillion of national debt. There's going to come a day of reckoning. It might not happen now. It's going to happen towards the end of 22, certainly in 2023. We'll be talking of increasing taxes. No one talks about that now. No one talks in the election of new taxes. But there will be new taxes halfway through the next Senedd.
The Welsh Conservative chairman, Glyn Davies, former MP for Montgomeryshire, he has said when questioned about where the money is coming from and where these hospitals will be built and so on, these are not answers that I can give at the moment. You need to ask Andrew R.T. Davies about that. Are you shocked by that?
Well, yes, it's ridiculous, isn't it? He's part of the team that wrote the manifesto. He's the chairman of the party in Wales. What does it say? They've made a promise, but they've not got no clue where the hospitals are going to be. That is so blatant electioneering. But then they're not alone. I've got to be even-handed in this. Other parties are given into this promise game, but that's a classic example of what I'm on about. We're going to spend more money on the National Health Service. Where are you going to spend it, Mr. Davies? Oh, I don't know. I can't tell you yet. Says it all, really.
Looking then at, let's just say the Tories do get into a Welsh government. Do you think that they would get a better deal, given that, Westminster, they're all in the same bed, aren't they? There they are. Boris Johnson, the Westminster government, Conservative government, they're not going to punish Andrew R.T. Davies and the Welsh Conservatives. They're going to give them a bigger slice of the cake, aren't they?
Well, that has been the standard claim by both Labour and the Tories over the years. Get our party in Westminster and in Wales on the same wavelength and we are bound to benefit more. Well, common sense says that if there's a Conservative government in London and a Conservative administration in Wales, yes, the relationship is going to be much closer. It will work better. Now, whether it works to the betterment of Wales is a totally different issue. Because as I've just answered you, there is going to be a day of reckoning. The furlough will cost. The massive monies that's been spent over the last year and a half, there will be a day of reckoning. There will be a day of payback. There will be tax rises. So whether there's a Conservative government in the Senedd as well as in Westminster, what happens in the UK economy end of 22, 23 will materially affect things in Wales. But yes, they will work closer together. And you can see that in what Andrew R.T. Davies is saying. He's claiming that Drakeford is making far too much claim that Wales has its own way. He is trying to roll back a bit of devolution. He is trying to weaken devolution. He doesn't say so, but he's got candidates, by the way, who are standing for the Senedd, who want to abolish the Assembly. There are 2 or 3 of them who came out openly in the last 3 or 4 months on that.
Let's look at some of the parties that are on the edge then, that have been there and stand to gain a couple of seats possibly, or sort of vanish into the ether. Lib Dems quite interesting because we interviewed Jane Dodds a while ago, and we asked her if her time was spent, if the party's days were over, and she said no, the journey sort of continues really, but we have a situation really between her and William Powell in Brecon and Radnorshire, and just shed a bit of light on that.
Well, that's going to be an interesting seat, isn't it? Bill is under a lot of pressure because Kirsty Williams had made that safe seat, a very safe seat for the Liberal Democrats. And no doubt Kirsty had a personal following that he'd built up over 20 years. So he's really under threat. The great irony of that situation is, of course, if Bill wins and retains the seat, the chances of Jane getting the regional seat for Mid and West Wales is pretty low. But the reverse also applies. Should Bill Powell not retain for the Lib Dems, Brecon and Radnor, Jane's chances of becoming an AM is greatly improved on the regional list. I'm rather sorry about the Liberal Democrats. As you know, it's public knowledge. I was quite senior in it for donkey's years, and I'm still a paid-up member, by the way, but not active. I don't go anywhere, don't do anything. What's happened to the Liberal Democrats and the Welsh Liberal Democrats over the last 10, 15 years has been sad, and it should never have happened. And by the way, it is now, well, on the periphery of Welsh politics. And the big question is, are we going to envisage for the first time no representative of the Welsh Liberal Democrats in our National Assembly?
We've also got to look at, I know you're not a fan of Neil Hamilton, we've got to look at UKIP. They were a party really that were sort of, their strength was on Brexit. That was done. He claimed victory in that. Now he wants to abolish the Assembly. He says that the Senedd is a miasma of political corruption. UKIP predicted to win one seat. Do you think they will get that? Do you think Hamilton will be back in?
No. Well, that's a heck of a straight answer to give you. I don't think so. It isn't that I haven't got much time for Hamilton. I just disagree with his politics. Brexit is a big issue for me. Leaving Europe. Europe has always been a big issue for me, my whole political life. It caused me problems when I was pro-Europe inside the Labour Party in the years when the Labour Party was against Europe. But I'm stuck with my guns on Europe. So that's the biggest issue for me on Hamilton. UKIP was a one-issue party. It came into being via Farage to stop and get out of Europe. That was their sole reason for existence. And they did very well last time in Wales on the back of that, because Wales also voted marginally, but they still voted to leave. That issue is gone. And Farage has gone. And Farage set up a new party, and he's even gone out of that, the Reform Party. He's no longer the leader of it. But then you've got other people like Mark Reckless and other people who were in UKIP. They went to some other party. I don't know where Mark is now. Has he abolished the Assembly Party? I don't know. No, I think they're in a bit of a shambolic state, really, aren't they? That the one issue was gone for them, and they can never replace that.
They will obviously have a following, and traditionally it is sort of working class right wing and so on. Abolish the Welsh Assembly. I mean, it's sort of like a comedy show, really. You're electing somebody to go into a parliament that they don't want to exist. One can only sort of imagine the questions at the Senedd if they do get a seat. What are your views on this particular issue? Well, I have none. I don't want to speak. I don't acknowledge or don't want to be part of this institution. It's quite farcical, isn't it?
Well, it is inconsistent. It's not farcical, mind. That's what UKIP did. They went into the European Parliament, 20-odd of them, or even more than 20-odd of them, and they wanted to abolish the European Assembly, European Parliament. So it's happened before. Abolish the Assembly is a more serious threat to Welsh politics than people realise. There is a cohort of people in Wales that I reckon is around 15% that actually want to abolish the Assembly. Now, that is unbelievable. After 20 years, they want to get rid of it. Now, There are serious questions there, by the way. That's another podcast. Why are there so many people in Wales against the continuance of the Assembly? What is the problem against the continuance of the Senedd? Is it the problem of the Senedd, the way it's conducted itself, its decision-making process, its image, or what is it? But the reality is, opinion polls show, by the way, although they differ, that they could win about 4 seats. Now, that would be amazing. But then UKIP won 6 seats. So, on the other hand, who knows? Okay. Who knows? They're in there with a shout to get some list seats. I have no doubt about it.
Let's finish on the Greens then. 16-year-olds to vote. Biggest issue for young people today is climate change. There could be a surprise here, couldn't there, with the 16-year-olds? The Greens could get something.
I have a great admiration for the Greens. I once suggested 20, 30 years ago, no less than that people should, if I was a member of Parliament, or if I was active in politics, I would love to be a member of the Greens and the Welsh Liberal Democrats and Labour. Because that is my politics. I'm that sort of person. So I have a great lot of regard for the Greens. And they're treated unfairly. Why? Because of the voting system. Because of the lack of proportional representation. Just why the Liberal Democrats are the same. So yes, I suspect more young people will vote for the Greens. They deserve a breakthrough. And I hope they will have a breakthrough, to be honest. I would like to see the Assembly having 1 or 2 members of the Green Party in it. I think that is a fairer representation of the Welsh voice. But whether it's going to happen, because the voting system could be against them, and what is more, it's going to be a very odd election, isn't it? You know what I mean? Very difficult campaigning. And there we go. Let's see what happens.
Well, there we go. I think we've taken a paintbrush over the whole of Welsh politics today. My thanks, as always, to Gwynoro Jones. We hope you've enjoyed this delve into politics and political life in Wales. As always, we want your views. Email editor@llanellionline.news. We'd love to hear from you. Coming up soon, we will be putting another podcast together looking at the individual manifestos of the political parties. For now, this is Llanelli Talk Radio. Myself, Alan Evans, and Gwynoro Jones saying goodbye for now. Hwyl fawr, diolch yn fawr i chi gyd.